the all-American half pound of 2 pure beef patties, lettuce, tomato.
Singles going steady.
Hello, everybody. This is Singles Going Steady. It's a podcast dedicated to exploring great singles with a particular eye to the punk, new wave, and DIY eras of the last century. My name is Steve McGowan.
I'm Adrienne and Meddock. We're in a band, the Beef People, who released a single in 1986 on our own label, Zub Records. But we're also record collectors and passionate especially about the expression of pop music perfection that is the single recording. Exploring the mystery of what makes for a great single is what propelled us to begin this podcast.
All right, and today on our first podcast, 001, we're going to be discussing the Buzzcocks Spiral Scratch, which is actually a EP. As the typical single, we would think would have 2 songs on it. This song, EP,
A and B.
Yes, yeah. This one has 4. So I guess you could call it an extended play. The podcast is called Singles Going Steady because Adrienne and I both love the album by the Buzzcocks with all their singles and B-sides on it.
Yeah, and when we were, we sort of, our heyday of the band was in the mid-'80s. And Steve and I took a break from both the band and the presence of each other for what I like to call our quarter-century palate cleanser.
Indeed.
And when we decided to sort of resume thinking about what we would do with music that we recorded with the band and sort of resume our musical partnership, one of the things I thought that would be fun to do is a podcast talking about the things we really love, some of our favorite records and singles. And Singles Going Steady came to me as what we should call it.
Yes, and to think about the Buzzcocks, they're kind of the year zero for us. A very unique British punk band. They're from Manchester in the north of England, and their stuff was a little more poppier, I think, than a lot of the other things that were coming out at the time. And we big fans. This first record was when Howard Devoto was the singer in the band, and he went on to form the band Magazine. He left the band right after this one. And Pete Shelley was just the guitar player. And it is kind of rough, but has a little bit of a pop edge to it. And Devoto's lyrics are very interesting, to say the least.
And of course, the Buzzcocks, and particularly Singles Going Steady, sort of the apotheosis of the great single, and that's another, Singles Going Steady is a great title for a podcast about singles, but also paying homage to the great masters of singles that are the Buzzcocks.
Indeed. My cousin lives in Glasgow, Scotland. That's where I was born. I've lived here most of my life.
You can tell from the accent.
Yes. And he came over to visit in the early 1980s and brought a bunch of singles with him. And among them were Spiral Scratch and some of the later Buzzcocks singles. And, of course, I dutifully taped them all and listened to them. And I started to really get into the Buzzcocks. My cousin Ross became the drummer in a band called the Soup Dragons, who had a few minutes of fame back in the 80s.
And some great singles that we may be talking about in future podcasts.
We may talk to him about them, actually. And they're big friends with the Teenage Fan Club as well. And as I was listening and really getting into the Buzzcocks singles, I started to realize, for me, they were kind of the poppy pop I always refer to them as like the Beatles of punk. They always had the good hooks and kind of the catchy melodies. This first record, it's not quite fully formed yet, but there's definitely some cool riffs, and there's some good lyrics and turn of phrases.
And I think one of the things that shows sort of the brilliance of the Buzzcocks, the songs when they're covered by others are, yeah, I mean, you sort of strip away the buzzcocky-ness of the recordings that some people might not have the ear for, and you realize, man, these are really great songs. Thinking about, Ever Fallen in Love, which, of course, was a huge top 40 hit when it was covered. So it's sort of a gateway drug, maybe, for some people into the punk movement.
So to go back to Spiral Scratch, it was released in 1977. It was one of the earliest punk singles in Britain, and it was considered it was the first independently released single. They formed their own label, New Hormones Records. It's on that label. They scraped up the money and they put it out themselves. They made 1,000 copies, and then it was reissued later. I have a reissue copy myself. So let's listen to the first song on the EP, a little bit of it. It's called Breakdown, with Howard Devoto singing.
If I see my little jittery, I can't restrain myself. I'm falling into fancy practice, can't contain myself. I'm gonna break down. I'm gonna break it down, yes. I'm gonna break down. I'm gonna break it down, yes. Now I can stand austerity, but it gets a little much when there's all these favorite things that you never get a touch. I gotta break down. I gotta break it down, yes. I gotta break down. I gotta break it down, yes. Anticipating reverie, but take a leave in senses and all in arrears. The next fuck I'll have it living on running. I'll break it down, yes. I'm gonna break it down, yes. I gotta break it down, yes. And whatever makes me sick, it takes away my concentration. It's just a hazard trembling, it gave me frustration. I break down, I gotta break it down, yes. I gotta break down, I gotta break it down, yes. So I hear that so it's company. For me it's plenty trouble, though my double thoughts are clearer now that I see it double. I break down, I gotta break it down, yes. You gotta break down, I gotta break it down, yes. A monkey like an Adam, what's too big for me? I'll give up the ghost before it gives up me. I wanna load it as a girl, I know I will be paid off. Give it a salary.
All right, so that clip, Breakdown, we had Howard Devoto spitting out lots and lots of lyrics there. Kind of hard to make them all out. Adrienne and I were talking about how he was using some fancy words.
Some clever and sophisticated wording that very literate. Yes,
definitely. I understand he works in a library now, so that kind of makes sense. The record was actually produced by Martin Hannett, who is famous for doing all the Joy Division records. It's not a lot of production on this record. Obviously, it sounds very punk. It's very dry, and
Joy Division was from
Manchester. So you could tell he was sharpening his skills there as well. It on the back sleeve of the EP. It talks about how each song was done in the first take or the third take, and if it had an overdub on it, so it was all done very quickly. You could tell, and it's definitely a punk record. It's a DIY record, and it's pretty amazing. One of the songs that really made a difference for myself and for writing songs and starting a band, the song "Boredom" is on this EP. They would re-record it again, but the original version of "Boredom," and it's the kind of song that, you know, when you're learning to play the guitar, you can figure it out pretty easily, and it's got the patented 2-note guitar solo all the way through it. It's a boring guitar solo, and Devoto's talking about how the punk scene is already kind of, you know, playing itself out, and he's bored with it and bored with everything, which is pretty much 1977 Britain is the way I understand it.
And of course, "Boredom" is one of the songs that we Boredom's one of the songs that we decided to cover in our band in the Beef People.
So let's play a little bit of the song "Boredom" from the Buzzcocks' Spiral Scratch.
Yeah, well, I say what I mean. I say what comes to my mind, because I never get around to things. I live a straight line, you know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene very drum. Boredom. And now I'm living in this movie, but it doesn't move me. No matter waiting for the phone to ring, there it ring a fucking thing. You know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene of very drum. Boredom. You see, there's nothing that's beyond me. I'm already a has-been, because my future ain't what it was. When I think I know what was that I mean. You hear me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene of very drum. Boredom. Ba-dum. Just came up from nowhere, and I'm going straight back there. You know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene very drum. Boredom. You say I'm living in this movie, but it doesn't move me. So tell me, who are you trying to arouse? I got to run out of my trousers. You know me, I'm acting dumb. You know the scene of
in listening to "Boredom," one of the things that becomes really clear is the sort of attitude that stays with the band, even though you have the lead singer, sort of the leader, the front person of the band, leave after this recording, or relatively quickly after that. And that's sort of the same thing happened to us in our band.
Yeah, definitely. We were talking about it earlier. We had our friend Sven Stenberg was the guy that was pretty much the front man of the band, and he wrote most of the lyrics for the songs, and he left pretty early, just like Howard Devoto did with the Buzzcocks, and we kind of had to soldier on like they did and pick up the slack, so to speak. And we see a lot of ourselves in the Buzzcocks because they put on shows like we did and put out their own records, and so we have
we're not the band. I think we have the inherent greatness that no, who does?
No, we're not saying that.
But no, not saying that at all. But in sort of in the spirit.
Mm-hmm. And Boredom was one of our big cover songs, and we're going to play you just a little snippet of us playing this back when we were learning our instruments back in the early 80s.
Yeah, before we're the masters that we are today.
Here we go.
I think one of the things about the Buzzcocks is that you see there and that carried through even to today is the wittiness and the self-effacing nature and that they're poking fun sort of at punk from within punk and as outsiders from Manchester not sort of falling into that whole London, screw the Queen,
right.
Everything's falling apart and everything sucks.
Yeah, they were not into the sloganeering that a lot of the early punk bands were, we hate everything and destroy Britain. And their music is pop and it deals with the heart and, it's a little bit more artistic, wouldn't you say?
Yes, artistic and thoughtful,
yes.
And not just reactionary.
Indeed. And I think that's why these recordings from so long ago are still relevant to us. And, we'll be hearing the Buzzcocks again on this podcast as they have so many great singles.
That's a well that will never run dry, I don't think.
Not at all.
So I think every week we want to, or not every week, but I think one of the things we want to think about is who else would we like to hear cover the single? You got anybody in mind?
Well,
it could be fictional, fictional character. I don't know, a Jane Austen character,
yes.
or imaginary, or living or dead. Who would this be a good cover for?
Well, of course, whenever I think of the Buzzcocks, I think of Green Day.
Well, yeah.
Pretty much they stole their whole shtick from them. So I could definitely hear Billy Joe singing Boredom. But a fictional character, then that's interesting.
Holden Caulfield, maybe?
All right. So we would also like to mention a couple other things that are only tangentially related.
Right. We call this our... persons, places, or things recommendation. What's your recommendation for this week?
Well, I'm the rock book guy, and Adrienne was kind enough to give me her copy of the new Pete Shelley book. It's not a novel or anything. It's just got the lyrics to pretty much all the Buzzcocks songs, and they are quite literate and quite wonderful. And I would recommend that to anybody. I believe that can be purchased at your favorite big box place or your local bookstore.
Yes, I'm sure your independent book seller would be glad to order it for you and
indeed.
have it delivered to your doorstep. And I guess for my recommendation, and this will probably be my constant recommendation, is Noah Hawley's wonderful envisionment. I'll make up a word of Legion, which is just about my favorite thing ever.
It is a TV show.
It is, and it's beautifully done. It's spectacular visually. The acting's wonderful, featuring Dan Stevens, who is about as far from Downton Abbey as you can imagine. It's just great. And if you
Also
haven't
has a
watched
character
it,
named Sid Barrett.
Yes. His romantic interest is Sid Barrett. It's all brilliant. It's all clever. It's all
I love
beautifully
it too.
done.
It's really well done. You should watch it.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's it for Singles Going Steady today. Thanks for listening. My name is Steve McGowan.
I'm Adrienne Meddock.
And we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
To learn more about the artists and recordings we just talked about, visit our website at zubrecords.com and click on the Singles Going Steady icon.
You'll also find links to the persons, places, and things we recommend, and much more.
You can find episodes of Singles Going Steady on our website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Singles Going Steady is brought to you by the power and majesty of Zub Records.
Zub Records. Smart sounds for sharp people.